Okay, I think we can get going. Hi, everyone. I'm Bev Atfield. I'm the Principal of Workplace Science at Jostle. Jostle is a tech company based in Vancouver, British Columbia, and our product is an employee intranet. So we're really interested in how to help people connect into things that matter to them at work. But my job is actually to understand what's happening for people at work. So how are people feeling and what is the experience that everyone is having in the workplace today? And as we can all attest to, these times have been challenging and uplifting and difficult and joyful, hopefully, as we've tried to figure out how to work together for many of us in a remote capacity as we've tried to grapple with the impact of the pandemic. So this series has been all about conversations, and it's about things that impact the power of voice at work, and how do we actually help people who are potentially disconnected from the workplace physically have a better connection to all the things that matter to them and the people that matter to them at work. So we are in our 9th event. We've been having these every 2 weeks. This is our last event for this first season. We'll be wrapping for a short break and then starting up in January. So today our topic is a really crucial one in that all of us have meetings at work every day. And it's really important for us to think about the impact that these meetings have on the experience that people have at work. So I'm delighted to have this topic on the table for this session, and even more delighted to welcome my two guests who will be helping us navigate this conversation. Kirsten Anderson is here with us, and Renée Safrata is also here with us. So I've put their details in the chat. Please feel free to check out their organizations and to connect with them on LinkedIn as we wrap up the event here today. I've also put my details there, so please feel free to connect with me as well. Okay, so let's just think a little bit about the history of meetings, right? Meetings have been around really since the earliest times when our cave-dwelling ancestors were huddling in, conversation about what to do next, about where to find food or how to feel safe or how to get warm. And if we even go, jump a little bit into the future from there, the ancient Greeks were huddling and gathering in all sorts of communal spaces, talking about the topics of the day. So from the very earliest times of our civilization, some meetings some shape or form of meeting has taken place. And if we fast forward a lot into the future to our present day, things started to change for humans as we moved towards cities that were being established, and the way that we work together started to change with the industrial age. And like many things that happened in workplaces from that point forward, I feel that the communal meeting has actually become a little bit, or maybe somewhat, dehumanized, because we now use it to be productive instead of coming together to use it for innovation and creation and to be together as humans like we used to do in those early days. So I'm interested in exploring today, what is the state of meetings and how can we disrupt them with this conversation? So to kick us off, I'd love to see what everyone is feeling about meetings at the moment. So if you could pop one word into the chat that describes your feeling about the state of meetings in your world right now. So we'll give you a minute just to do that. Okay, so Erin said sharing, I said variable, Kirsten said plentiful. What else is out there? How are people feeling about meetings right now? And hopefully this meeting is one of the more uplifting meetings that you'll have today. Renee says productive. We've got informative, necessary, breaks up the day, connection. Excellent. Well, I'm not really seeing too much negative in there, which is really great. I feel like we are facing a bit of drain of energy with just the sheer number of meetings we're having. And for those of us who are working remotely now more than before, I think we can probably say that we're feeling more tired. Perhaps our eyes are sore. So maybe there's some physical impacts to our day with the number of meetings we're having. So Darren says volume. Yeah, I mean, we definitely are having more of these meetings and in this format as well. Well, thanks everyone for sharing. I'm going to ask Kirsten and Renee to give us their impressions of what is the state of meetings right now as you're seeing it from your perspective. So, Kirsten, why don't we start with you?
I love that we started with this question from everybody because I think it touches on, the mix that we're experiencing. Sometimes it is totally connective and so great to connect with people, and other times it just feels like too much and we're done and we've had one too many. Before we used to walk perhaps across campus, across a building to physically go to a meeting, and so that there was that physical movement, and then waiting outside of a meeting room or having that time to chat before a meeting. So there was more opportunity for natural conversation. So I do feel there's a lot missing from the virtual that we can bring back to the virtual meetings. And some of that might be physical and some of it might be around a connection. We'll touch on more of that later.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsten. Renee, how about for you?
It's really an interesting topic for me. The context that I would give everyone is eight years ago at Vivo team, we made the decision to put everything online, and our team, as virtue of that, came in from 4-hour time zone across the country because they were the right people, not because they were in the right place, but because they were the right people to do the job, and they had a microphone, a webcam, and a way to connect. We didn't have a choice. We never have had a choice to meet face to face in a boardroom personally, unless there's airplane flights that make that happen, which as a new company, we chose not to do that. So when COVID has hit and now we see our customers no longer have that choice, I am quite fascinated with how tough it has been for people. So it has been a sort of shocking thing to do this. And so I think what you'll hear from me and my perspective is it actually can be quite much more rich and robust than people may be thinking right now. And I think that's actually a manager problem. It sits with the manager. It doesn't sit with HR. I think a lot of managers are going across the threshold and complaining to HR and putting a lot of stress on HR right now. They don't need to be. They need to actually be putting on their thinking cap and figuring out how to do meetings more effectively and how to engage people at a higher level. And I think that's where we come in. And I think that's why, we've had a really great year this year, because a lot of people are saying to us, how do you do this well? So that's what I would say, and more later, as Kirsten says.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, I think you're in a really good position to teach many others, how to cope through these times. And I know that both you and Kirsten have arrived in this space with lots of experience about how to engage and connect people. And I'm looking forward to hearing more of what you have to say as we dig into this. Um, I was reading a report by Jason Fried, who did a TED talk on meeting ineffectiveness. And um, he was talking about things like 75% of people have never received formal training on how to conduct an effective meeting. 73% of people are doing other things while they're in a meeting. And, 9 out of 10 people are daydreaming while they're in meetings. So these are numbers that are telling me that there's all sorts of other things going on for people that are making them distracted and not able to actually contribute to the meeting in a constructive way. And if we think about how much time we spend in meetings and what the function of meetings is meant to be in an organization, it's to help us actually make decisions, innovate, move things forward. It's not there for us necessarily to have social time or chatter with people, even though that does form part of it. So we know that there are all these things going on for us in workplaces. Maybe let's talk about some of the bad habits that we think we've transferred from the in-person meeting into the remote meeting for a minute. So, Kirsten, what do you think is the worst thing that we've brought over from the pre-pandemic world into this new remote meeting realm?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is redundance. Having meetings that are potentially redundant. They are covering information that could have been covered in a different way. They could have been an email. It's not the best use of time to gather people to discuss something that they're just going to pass on. It's not necessarily they're not making a decision. There's no necessarily action being taken. It could be just information sharing, so around awareness. So those are opportunities for different forms of communication. And so that is something that has happened in on a Zoom level, and where it could be, we really need to be conscious of the time because of energy. And it is a different type of energy. And, further to what Renee was saying, this can be a very connective way for us we can still be connected when we see each other face to face and share that energy. And so energy also would be, I put that in as well, as like not setting the tone of the energy that you want to have in the room from the beginning. That happens in person and it happens online as well. Those are my two that pop into my head first.
Yeah, thanks. I like your point about not being the best use of time. And I really think that we should be challenging ourselves right now to use this opportunity. There's that saying, don't let a crisis go to waste, right? And we've talked a lot in previous conversation sessions, as well as, I know that there are these conversations happening elsewhere about why would we go back to what wasn't working? Let's use this opportunity to create a better way to work together and to challenge the things that we used to do before. And meetings are one of those things that I think we should be challenging. So Renee, what about you? What do you think is one of the worst things that we could continue on with?
Yeah, I'll say two things on this one. So right away, if we just pretend that this is a meeting, and as I said, I'm going to give the managers in the room a bad rap here. If we think that this is a meeting, and I know it's not, it's a little bit more of a casual conversation, but right off the top, Bev, if you were the leader or the manager of the meeting, you've just given us all permission to come on video or to not. And so immediately you're setting a behavioral norm and a behavioral permission that's okay. But if you think back to the boardroom days, we'd never say to half, we have half of our people here on video, half are not. We'd never say in a boardroom meeting, hey, we're having a meeting, but half of you can stand outside of the meeting while we have the meeting. And that's essentially what the experience of connection is in this meeting. I'm much more connected to those of you who have chosen to get up on video. Now, I know with COVID, some people are hanging over their kitchen counter and they've got their 3-year-old behind them. And so I'm not judging that. But importantly, as a team lead, manager, or as a team member, if I understand the data and the norm, and I've set norms within the meeting, and I've understood the data of the people that are in the meeting. For instance, Darren has a 3-year-old in his backdrop. Then I can know that Darren's going to go on and off video, and that's okay because together we are navigating that meeting. That's the one thing that I would say. So setting behavioral norms, whether they are in the workplace, in the boardroom, or on Zoom or on some sort of remote meeting, is really, really critical to the team being effective and connecting. And I think that's the big word, because really when people say, oh, I used to like the times when we would be at a networking thing and we would connect. To be quite honest, whenever I went to a networking event, I'd grab my glass of wine and hope I could get out of there as soon as I could. So there's that we're going into the romance because we've left the reality far behind, and it's a bit blurry right now, and the green looks grasser on the other side. The last thing that I would say about that is, and I totally forgot it, so it's going to come back to me later. So we'll get there.
Well, there'll be a lot more opportunity to dig into it as we go on here. But I think one of the things that I really appreciate that you said there, and an extension of that is, in this new realm, we really have to use everything we have at our disposal to be the proxy for connection that we no longer have in person, right? So trying to bring all of our senses to bear. And we do that by having all of the video capabilities available to us, right? So, and again,
Bev. I got it.
Go for it. Jump.
Okay, this was the jumping point that I wanted to say. For those of you who are in British Columbia, we are lucky right now because British Columbia has gone down into its next stage of lockdown. My concern was 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago when our customers were saying 40% of our people are going back to the office, 60% of their people are going to stay in a remote workplace until February, June next year. The biggest concern I had was, as you said, Bev, don't let a crisis go by the wayside. That those people that now, the 40% that had the boardrooms, were going to go, great, boardroom, let's go. And they were going to go into it and get those people who were on remote to plug in on remote. Well, guess what? You've just taken two paradigms and now you're trying to merge two paradigms. So it would be better if companies actually took the displays right out of the boardroom and said, no, for the 40% that are in the office, you still have to connect and keep the playing field the same so that you discipline yourself to learn how rich this can be and learn it to make it a better, like leverage the crisis, realize what you can do. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that if we can demonstrate that meetings have value and are enriching to people, and if we're actually solving what the actual root problem is, people might show up more ready to participate and bring themselves fully into those sessions, right? Whether we're in person or not. Because, I think we can all talk about, the Zoom fatigue and things that are being, put out there right now as obstacles to people communicating and participating in meetings. But I think if we're being honest, some of those root problems were there even before the pandemic, and it's because we were running really bad meetings, right?
Absolutely. Like
So,
if we took a poll on all of the people that are on this session today in the participant features, if you put a check mark to in response to, yes, my meetings just have an agenda with a laundry list of topics, put a check mark. If your meetings don't even have an agenda, put an X. And let's just get a quick poll to see what, and that's whether you're at the office or at work. So people are putting into the chat, that's fine too. So a check mark means it's a laundry list of items. Well, here, thank you for that, Darren, Victoria. That's the first problem, I think. Because actually, if we look at behaviors and we look at an agenda not as a laundry list of items, but as a number of different types of processes. Sometimes we're going to brainstorm. Sometimes we're going to present and get feedback. Sometimes we're going to report. And everybody in the meeting understands the behavior related to that process. Then those topics can be overlaid in the process. These three topics are brainstorming topics. Now everybody has an understanding of what they do in a brainstorming session. That's where you get that aliveness and that richness. But if it is just 10 laundry list of items, and by the way, you're not going to get to item number 8 because you've gone down such a rabbit hole of discussion in item 3. Oh my God, you're nodding off, you're off video, and you're sleeping in the background because Dr. Phil's got some topic on that's a hell of a lot more exciting.
Thanks, Renee. So maybe let's ask anyone who hasn't spoken yet. What is the biggest frustration or the worst part of meetings that you would like to leave behind today? So anyone else want to jump in, go off mute and just share with us?
I will share one.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi. This is not from a Vivo team meeting, but I'm a volunteer for an event committee, and their calls are silence. Like whenever there's a committee meeting, it's not on video. It's just on a call-in phone conference line, and whenever the person chairing says something, it's complete silence. Nobody says a word, and it's just so odd to me that people just were not willing to engage. So I guess engaging online or on the phone, people aren't as comfortable doing it. Is the issue.
Competence, totally. Competence, permission, norms. I get that, Lynn. It's a good example.
And creating that safety, that people feel safe to contribute, that they're not going to be shot down, that those fears have been diminished through connection ahead of time.
Yeah, I think also there's there's a stigma that silence is agreement. And it's kind of a cultural thing that we have. And so people choose silence before they choose contribution. And that's dangerous because you've been invited to that committee, Len, you've been invited to that meeting because you do have a viewpoint and perspective. And by the way, you're getting paid to bring your viewpoint and perspective forward. So again, it's the manager's role to really drive the accountability to make sure that there's a balanced forum in those meetings. And it's the individual's opportunity to start to develop their ability to come forward in a group, because that could actually be quite hard for them. But again, they're being paid to push that and make that contribution.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the agenda-less meeting, just showing up to a meeting and not really knowing like not only what the purpose of the meeting is, but like what the expectation is of you. Are you being informed of information? Are you expected to contribute? If it's a brainstorm, am I supposed to be bringing ideas in? That's to me, that's such a killer. You just show up in a group of people and nobody knows what to do. So
clarity of expectations. Yeah.
Darren, you just put a great little tidbit in the chat that I'd love to respond to too, if that's okay. Again, with Vivo Team, because we've been doing this for so long, this year we launched a program called Shine Online, and it's Shine Online for those people who have been perhaps doing classroom training and they've never done it online before, or even managers who've never run online meetings, or board members who've never had a board meeting online. And the whole idea was exactly to your challenge, which is if we don't have an understanding of how to lead and be online in an engaging way to grab people, to get them to engage in our presentation, it's really tough because it's a one-way dialogue. You could be in your bathroom just presenting to the mirror because nobody's responding, right? So there's tips and tricks and techniques that we can use. And I mean, we're actually dipping in a shallow way right here by engaging. Bev's called out a couple times things on chat. I've suggested, but we didn't teach at the beginning how to use a participant feature. So that's the consequence with the check mark and the X. We don't have that, but that's a great demonstration, illustration of how we didn't get that feedback from the audience because we didn't take that time to teach that, to help people be competent, to give people permission to behave in that manner, right, Darren? So it's a matter of learning how to do that, is what I would say. Kirsten, do you want to say anything to that too?
Well, I was also noticing the comments around the tech and having a disparity in difference of tech of why people might not be showing up. I totally appreciate the point that it is far more connective when we do have all the video screens on, and for the speaker, it doesn't feel like you're speaking at people, you're speaking with them when you can see everyone's reactions, and the reality that technology may not be equivalent across for everyone. We do get that vulnerability and authenticity when we see people's backgrounds and see what's going on for them, whether kids are joining or pets. However, if we can't see people, how, I'd love to explore that, like how do we get more interaction? And I think the chat feature is one way we can hear from people who can't speak out loud or show themselves because they're maybe in a public setting or their company hasn't provided that equipment.
Yeah, like I was saying at the beginning, when I was saying it's not an HR issue for a manager to run a great job. It is an HR issue to bang on the doors of C-suite executives as COVID goes on and on and on and say, we need the right tools to do our job. And I am seeing, unfortunately, with the clients that we work with, that there are some people, some HR people who don't sit at the strategic table, and they can't get that moving. So what's happening is at the strategic table, the decision is being made on the cheapest product that doesn't provide what you're saying, Kirsten, the tools for people to be on video all together, or, buy a bunch of webcams. They're cheap, right? Like, really? Anyway, just my whine and complaint.
Well, I think You know, the points that everyone's raising here is the way I would sum it up is that meetings are an extension of your workplace culture and the experience that you are creating for people in your workplace. So why wouldn't you invest in making meetings in particular, which are one of the most crucial vehicles at the moment for those of us who are not working in the office to stay connected? So those sitting in the C-suite, you know, this should be the first place that you're investing to make sure that people are able to come together properly and be productive and effective and supportive and, you know, all those other things that we need to see when we're in person. So why don't we switch into, since we've already now started thinking about, you know, how can we disrupt meetings? We've talked a bit about the state of the nation, where we are. So let's step into what we think we can change and should change in meetings to create that experience and make people feel good about these events when they have them. So when we were talking about this ahead of the session, Renee and Kirsten and I were kicking around, you know, all the sort of the parameters of meetings that we think might change if we were to really pay attention to them. And so maybe let's start with the first thing, and this was already raised a little bit earlier, around being clear on why we're even meeting. So Kirsten, maybe I could ask you to start us off on this subtopic, if you will.
I noticed a couple times you brought up creativity and innovation. Of course, those are my favorite meetings because you can't have creativity and innovation without play. So I think the why is often missed in that clarity, and they would certainly be eliminated. I wanted to touch on as part of the why is who's going to be in the room, and so who are we bringing into this meeting? Who needs to be here? And thinking about the way we are today, we wouldn't have a real life meeting where, or we would hope not to have a real life meeting where 20% of the people were doing 80% of the talking. You know, if we want to be truly inclusive and diverse, we would hear more variety of voices at an actual meeting. And so if we're trying to make a decision, are all the people that need to be a part of the decision in the room? You know, if we're creating information and awareness, is it the key people that are going to be there? So I think a part of why is who. They're very connected, and you know, we can eliminate meetings if we narrow in on who's in the room and what is the intention, what is the outcome that we want to have behind that. If it's a discussion, you know, just considering things, you know, that'll affect the length of the meeting as well, how much time we're scheduling for that meeting, and format, you know, the way it's laid out.
So is part of the change that we need to making meetings more democratic in terms of people's ability to opt in or opt out of meetings? Like if I feel that I've been invited to a meeting that I know that I'm just on the list because I'm part of that team and it really has got nothing to do with me, the project that they're talking about has got nothing to do with me, is it okay for us to start opting out of meetings that we don't think we can bring value to or that are not the best use of our time? So what's your thought about that, Kirsten, or Renee, jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think there's two things that need to happen. So I totally agree with what Kirsten just said. It has to be a thoughtful, what's the meeting about? Who needs to be involved? I think you're right, Bev. There's a couple things that go on. One is that most often, and I'm just going to call out Canadians here, we are a culture of being nice. We love to be nice. We love to include everybody. Just come to the meeting. And yet, if we actually were willing to look at the dollar value that sits around the table of people who are sitting silently, but that meeting at an hour, do the calculation of their salary, how much is that meeting costing us? And if there isn't a contribution from each one of those people, that is a very costly meeting. Your point, Bev, can I opt out? You can only opt out if you have faith, trust, and assume that you will be informed, that there is a communication loop that will somehow get that information that is valuable to your role in the organization. But if you just opt out and that doesn't exist, then there's going to be feathers ruffled insults made. Again, it goes back to what are the norms and what's okay. We always teach we have a structures training at Vivo team, and we always teach that we need to start to build being respected in teams, not just being nice, because nice is actually quite life sucking when you think about it. It looks good on the surface, but it doesn't. It really takes a lot of energy. But if we work on being respected, and we work on realizing who needs to contribute, who needs to support the contribution, and who needs to be informed on the contribution, and then maybe weigh in later, hey, we got a winning combination, and we've decreased the cost of those meetings. Now there's 4 people in the meeting, not 12, right? That's my comment. Kirsten?
I love that you brought up the cost, and I would add on to that, to Bev, if people are feeling safe to opt out. So they feel safe to opt out on the front, that there will be that follow-up of information, as Renée said, and they feel safe that they won't, it's not expensive for them to do that. It's not expensive as in they won't be judged by their coworkers, by the leaders, that they, the FOMO, the fear of missing out on a meeting is real, or the certainty of missing out if they opt out. So I'm curious, like if people put in, or they could use the hands up or whatever on their reactions, on the reactions button they can hit, if they would feel safe to opt out of a meeting, or if they would need some supports already there that aren't there yet to opt out of a meeting. Because it's a curious question. I love that you posed it, Bev, because I think it would highly improve the efficiency of meetings if people were opting out of the ones that didn't feel necessary.
The other thing, Bev, too, like we've got a couple here that have put their hands up.
Thumbs up, they're feeling safe that they could opt out. So that's
sadly, I think the data on that point is a bit tough, because 2 of the members are on my team, and that's one of our norms. So I think out of the 3 hands up, that might not have been a good survey, but just calling it out. Sorry. Yeah. But Bev, the other thing that I want to bring into that is, again, with managers and with behavioral skills, teams need to know what is a common model for communication that they're using. And the truth is that once the meetings get larger than 4, it is very difficult if our people are not sharing a model for communication to actually navigate through a conversation, even if it's led by the manager or a particular subject matter expert who's just made a presentation within the team. It's tough beyond the numbers of 4 for people to navigate conversation and come to an aligned decision. Again, on cost, it would be better probably to have, especially on online formats, 3 shorter, same amount of time used, but 3 shorter meetings with less people to get to the majority rules or the consensus or whatever you need. So I think, again, it comes down to individual competence, individual motivation, and manager or leader competence and motivation, because we can really, really take this down a dark hallway quickly if that doesn't exist.
Yeah, it really does bring us back to, what is your environment support to begin with, in terms of trust and safety, and helping people feel like if they don't go to the meeting, well, they'll still be supported, or they've got the mechanism to still be in the loop but not have to go to the meeting. I recently interviewed the CTO of Doist. I don't know if anyone knows that company, but they're fully remote and they work asynchronously. So they're a company of around 70 people, and they don't have meetings at all. They do all of their workflow in shared Google Docs. And so because they're all dispersed along different timelines or time zones, they can't possibly congregate at any given time with the people who need to be in those meetings. So, imagine that, not having a single meeting in your workplace, right? You have to have a lot of trust and structure in place and process in place to support that, right? So that's probably on the other end of the spectrum from the too many meetings, I would imagine. Before we move on, Crystal, did you have a comment? I saw that you raised your hand. I just want to make sure we don't miss you.
I think the raise of hand might have been in agreement to the
I think it was just, it might have just been a little before that. Okay, perfect. Karen, Renee, did you have something to add?
Well, I think, again, speaking to the richness of the online format, and you bring up a really great point, the shared document piece. What I know, which I have loved in the years that we've been working with Vivo, and particularly in sales, with sales team members, it's a great training tool, because I can be on Zoom with a prospect, with a customer, have my sales associate in the background on a shared document, and we can be having a conversation that is completely invisible to the prospect or customer. And I can use that as a training tool to develop the skills of my sales associate in the background by just putting into the document, this is where I'm thinking of going right now based on what this person just said. And so then we debrief at the end. We're debriefing not only on the meeting, but we're debriefing on the actual real time, what happened, what was said, and at what moment did Renee choose to go left or choose to go right to close the sale. And that happens, I'm going to say, with pretty much across all the board Vivo team with our members meetings, is that our internal team members are sharing a doc in the background. So unlike the example that you just gave, but another way to add richness to your meetings is to have that shared capacity with fellow people. I would also say, I'm going to throw another wrench possibly into this. There's a lot of talk about safety. I think that really we have, it's chicken and egg kind of thing. We have to, in order to contribute, sometimes we have to take a risk. And a risk may not be that there's a soft mattress to fall on. We're taking a risk because we choose to do something differently in order to shake up the effectiveness of the meeting or shake up the juice of the online perspective. So I would just add that we say, culturally, we have to navigate safety and we have to navigate risk and figure out in our stage of development, what do we want to do with it? And I've seen a lot of gems come out of people taking a risk and throwing something on top of the boardroom table or in the Zoom chat or the Microsoft Teams Jamboard thing or whatever, right?
I think that's the most exciting part of COVID, or like the only, like my big silver lining has been the opportunity for risk, the opportunity for change, and smashing the status quo. We get to re-examine how we do meetings. We get to re-examine how we do business, our purpose, our vision, our values, and our politics. Everything's up for grabs, how we interact. So if I was to say one positive to pull out of all the darkness, for me, it's taking risks. And as far as the safety piece, I think that we can support people in taking risks. That we can say, it's a safe place here to take those risks and make mistakes, screw up, fail. It doesn't mean that there's no accountability, that, you won't have to fix those mistakes, but it is a place where it's encouraged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, Kirsten, that's where feedback, like if I know that I'm in a meeting and my leader, my manager, or whatever is going to give me real-time feedback on the behavior that I just tried on for size, then I have that sort of safety cushion or safety net. And I think that also it's really important in teams to just develop that feedback loop so that it's not a career limiting move to ask for feedback. I ask my team all the time, tell me what I did. Tell me, was that a good thing that I did, or did I screw up there? And so for individuals to be able to come forward and say, I'm developing my meeting skills here. What do I need to do differently in order to contribute at a higher level, I think is really important.
I noticed Erin just made a comment about AA students making mistakes, and I would add on to that about grit and resilience. And it's something we haven't spoken about that necessarily. And if we are changing the face of meetings, we're going to be making mistakes, and we will gain resilience muscles by doing that, because we will realize that, oh, we can change things and it may work and it may not, and we can try a different method and that may work and it may not work. And that is about resilience and grit. So the A students that graduate high school or university, top of their class, if everything was easy and smooth for them, they may or may not have success in their work. But if they failed and it was hard and they kept going and they kept persevering, they will have that much more grit and resilience to thrive in a work environment.
Bev, I have a question for everybody. I'd love to hear, because you came here for a reason today. So I'd love to hear in the chat, is there something that's going on in your head right now where you're like, oh, I really would like to get more of on this or on that? Can everybody pop into the chat either what they want more of or a P for pass? And I'd like to hear from everybody so that we know that everybody has participated in some way. Just pop it in the chat there, because we've got some time still that we can make sure it works. Oh yeah, fabulous. Darren, I like that one, the introverts one. Can I take that one? Jump into that one before
I had
Kirsten
that in
here?
my notes too to mention.
Okay, so again, Darren, at Vivo Team, we come from a different perspective. We come from a behavioral perspective. So instead of our philosophy is instead of putting people into a sort of a characteristic or a profile style analysis box, like an introvert or an extrovert, to actually look at their behavior. So I have demonstrated today clearly that yes, you could put me in the extrovert box, but I'm only extroverted in some hours of my day. Many hours of my day, I'm in the introverted box. You're just seeing them, right? But what are the behaviors that I've demonstrated? I've said things like, I want to jump in, or I've spoken a lot today on this session. So if you were to actually think now and take a video camera like your device, and those who you are judging to be introverts, to actually look at what their behaviors are, right? You could actually probably come up with 1 to 3 behaviors that you're noticing in your meetings. People are choosing to be off camera when really I know that they could be on camera perhaps, or people are choosing not to vote when I ask them to vote, or not to chat when I ask them to chat. Well, then once I have the behavioral set, then I, as the leader of the meeting, as the manager, can now choose to change my behavior. So I'm choosing to unlearn things that I did ineffectively to get those people to participate. I'm choosing to learn new behaviors for myself to get people to participate. One of those could be, Jaden, I'd like to hear from you. What do you think about that? So calling people by their names specifically. We believe that one of the behavioral norms in online meetings is it is a voluntold experience. So we get people to voluntold the other. We don't say that a norm is volunteering. A technique that we use is we do something called go and throw. So I've gone now, I've spoken, and then I throw to you, Darren, and now you speak. Darren, after you go, you throw to Bev. So nobody knows who's going to get the ball thrown to them. And it's a volunteer richness. So my 2 suggestions would be to get your video camera, think about the behaviors that you see in that judgment of introvert, think about how you can change 1 or 2 of your behaviors, see how it goes for you. And maybe one of the behaviors is a technique of voluntold and go and throw. Helpful? Okay, thumbs up.
Sorry, Bev, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I'm sorry, I dropped off there for a minute. In this new world, we live in uncertain circumstances, and I'm just so grateful that there were others to continue the conversation with me. So
we're good.
Jump in, Kirsten, thanks.
Yeah, I also had about the introverts to bring up because certainly when we're doing Lego Serious Play in person or online, one of the techniques that keeps it from being an 80-20 conversation is that everyone has equal time to say their story. So, everyone is assigned, like you get 2 minutes or 1 minute and we go through a circle. One way you can do it online is actually if you have the larger number, say 10 or 12 in a room, not a nice, concise group of 4, you don't need this, but it's say your larger numbers like this, is to number everybody from the beginning, to rename yourself with a number so that you can go through a number. And so using those facilitation skills, like Renee was saying, to really read the room, to watch people, how they're interacting, and who hasn't contributed yet is key to meetings for sure. And if you wanted to add a little fun and play to Renee's suggestion, what we do is also the throw, but we physically throw something. So we might say, the theme is like a musical instrument. I'm throwing an accordion to you, Darren, and then Darren would catch it with his hands, and there you go. And then he would throw it. He would shout out who he was throwing it to, but he might say, now I'm throwing a trombone, and he would throw it to someone. So you can do different themes there, but it is a fun kind of like physical thing that gets the energy up in the room, and still covers that base of everyone contributing.
And I would add to that as well, Kirsten. I think that I've talked a little bit about this whole idea of competence and communication, that by doing that right off the top, if we have this belief that it's going to be a balanced forum, if we do that right off the top of the meeting, we allow people to stretch a little bit. It's kind of like stretching before you do a workout. It warms their voice up a little bit, even if it's just hey, how are you coming to the meeting today? You know, good, not good, whatever. For those people who are resistant to bring their voice forward, they have an opportunity to warm that voice up right away. And that is meaningful. It's a technique that can be used to bring people on.
Erin, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, something that I haven't heard either of you mention is that just the idea of expectation too. So Darren, if you are considering people who have a harder time coming forward, it's setting those expectations, whether it be through an agenda or just off the top of the meeting, that the expectation is that everyone is going to come forward. Then if I'm sitting there and I know, versus if I'm potentially more resistant to come forward and you just put me on the spot, I might sort of close out.
Right.
But if I know what's expected of me, like we know about the go and throw, we know about the voluntold, it's like there's an expectation set there. That willingness is much higher. So that was just something I wanted to mention.
For sure.
So in the spirit of being inclusive in meetings, how do we've talked a little bit about introverts and different styles and different preferences for showing up, but how do we create a meeting where everyone feels that they can be who they are in that moment without too much prescription, right? Or do we necessarily need prescription in order to give us sort of the rules of how to operate in the meeting itself? So I don't know, Renee, Kirsten, or anyone else?
You know, that's a really big question, because often that's fundamentally in the culture of the company, the organization. I do think, kind of like when I drive my car on the highway, I can choose to drive 20 kilometers an hour, 60 kilometers an hour, but I know that I need to drive on the right side of the yellow line. So there's rules and norms for me to participate on the highway. I think that's important. How people show up and how people contribute and how people, what they come forward with, is the part where the edges can be ruffled, and it can be hopefully it's quite freeing, because hopefully we've designed this meeting to be a whole bunch of different views, perspectives, and opinions and judgments, and we want to get that. But I do think you need to have kind of some preliminary behavioral norms. I think I've answered your question, possibly. Yeah.
So what happens though if I'm, as the leader of the meeting, drive a Lamborghini and everyone else is driving a Mini?
Okay.
And I'm far ahead of them.
Yeah.
What does that do to the meeting?
Well, that's not good. Slow your Lamborghini down. And so here's the thing is, again, like at Vivo Team, we often talk about how teams and leaders need to be in alignment, and their behaviors need to be aligned. Because if their behaviors aren't aligned, we're going down. You're in Whistler already. The rest of us are still in Surrey, right? Like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to work. So again, I often call out the managers in the room and say, it's your opportunity to unlearn your behaviors and to learn more behaviors of how you can show and focus all of us who are not in Lamborghinis, how to put more gas in our pedal, right? Or put our foot to the metal, kind of thing. I think that's really important, that we point our finger as much at ourselves than at others. How's that Lamborghini going there, Bev?
Yeah, I love the metaphor.
I took my foot off the gas.
It's very good.
Yeah.
And to play on that, you know, I'm picturing this racetrack, And it is a very diverse racetrack. There is a Mini and a pickup truck and a Lamborghini, and everybody's bringing their individual strengths to the meeting, that everyone is in a different car, yet they can all drive at the same pace. And perhaps the leader or someone, and maybe not titled leader, but anyone is leading, and they're setting the pace. They're the pace car at the front of this V or a line, and directing and guiding around this track. But they're all in alignment, as Renee said. They're all together as a group, with the same goal of that same finish line on the track, and yet they are all driving different vehicles and adding to the strength of the race team, so to speak.
I also think it's really important, and I think Darren's spoken to this a little bit, as you have too, Bev. It's really important to realize who's come into the meeting with more information. Like, you've probably, got that in your mind. You're having that meeting on Thursday at 2. You want to get to this decision, and some people have been off doing their own thing. And so there's an opportunity to sort of say, hey, I want to push this forward, but I also want, using the Lamborghini and the racetrack analogy, that people who need to think this through a little bit, we give this a pit stop, go to the pit stop for the evening, come back to this tomorrow. And I know you probably do that already, but I find my hard drive, and I know everybody's hard drive right now, is extremely full. We're all carrying so much these days and doing so much, and often with COVID, our teams are leaner and we are doing more, and we're working at home and we're working longer. So when I come into a meeting sometimes, let's say with Lynn, who's on my team, and she's done her good work and she's really pushed the envelope forward in her own days. And she's coming forward with a lot of rich information that I want to digest. I can't digest it if she's in the Lamborghini and I'm in a slower car. And it's my responsibility to say, I need you to slow down too. So it's not just the manager's responsibility. It's, again, to Erin's point, that we set expectation that I expect us to all be aligned. What does alignment look like?
And those headsets are two-way communication that those race car drivers have. So
exactly.
Right.
Analogy for days.
That's a fabulous segue into the next point that I wanted to make, or question that I wanted to raise around. It's really the communication skills that we need to be working on more than anything else, I think, because everything that we've talked about here today actually hinges on being able to communicate clearly and well with one another. It doesn't necessarily matter what format your meeting takes. If you can't clearly communicate with one another, your meeting will fail. So I think, in addition to, we talked about the investments that managers need to be, or CEOs need to be making in bringing people together, I think we need to be thinking about what communication training do folks need. I don't think people need to be trained on how to conduct a good meeting. I think people need to be trained on how to communicate well. So thoughts around the table about that?
Yeah, and I will say our business has really noticed this year with COVID, because I think what was happening when people were in offices together, the overarching look upon managers and their set of skills to align their teams and to get results was sort of shoved under the rug. And then as soon as people went to their own islands called their home offices, and now people were going, hey, are our managers even talking to their team members? It became, oh, actually, we have not set our managers up for success. They do not actually know what it takes to truly manage and what it takes to truly develop others. And so we're seeing just a surge of business based on that, where companies, like you said, they're not only making the investment into the technology, but they're making their investment into their people in various ways, right? And I think as COVID goes on, they really realize this needs to happen, especially when, I'm just going to add one other thing, there is increasing mental issues going on for people who are in those solo micro condos in downtown and are held up because Dr. Bonnie Henry has said you can't go to work, and they haven't spoken to 3 people on their team for 2 months, right? Like, so that connection is so important. But if we don't teach that person who's in their 1-bedroom apartment, and we don't teach that manager how to be competent, what connection looks like different than communication, start with communication, and then how do you really truly connect and see what's going on, we've got problems, and we're going to continue to have problems, and that's going to give companies big costs because we're going to lose people, and we already are losing people. Right? So people think now they have a job. They don't think they have a career. That is scary. That does not allow for business sustainability going forward. So if you are a manager on the line and you're going to walk away from this today and say, do I know each one of my direct reports? Do I think each one thinks they have a job, or do they think they have a career? That's important and instructive information. Kirsten, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, our clients are really coming during COVID, really hyper focused around connection and belonging, but also change and resilience. And I think that meetings are a part of that, and communication is a part of that, and leadership is a part of that. So, you know, when we're talking about burnout and overwhelm and being tired, you know, which is the number one word I'm hearing from the 150 people in a corporate team, the number one word that keeps coming up is tired. A part of that is communication, is emotional intelligence. You know, how are we communicating with our team about our workload, about how we're being efficient or not efficient, you know, what really needs to be done here. So I think that's what I would add, is that these things are an interconnected web, and we need to kind of look at it holistically and include the emotional intelligence piece in there.
Totally.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we are coming up on the hour here. Is there anyone else who'd like to jump in with a quick 10-15 second last thought before we wrap?
And I wonder, Bev, too, if we could just ask people, was there one thing that you took away from today? Just pop it in the chat so we know what's one thing you took away, and how did this contribute to your life? That'd be great.
And I will share, while we're just doing our closing thoughts here, I'm going to share a couple from Kirsten and Renee, just that you can reference, that have, there some of the things we talked about here today, but these are just some really excellent resources for you to think about, pre-meeting, post-meeting, and then what happens in the midst of the meeting, to really disrupt how we're doing this very important function in organizations today. So thank you very much for everybody's attention and ideas, and for sharing your thoughts and insights. And in particular, Kirsten and Renee, thank you for sharing some of your thoughts on how we can continue to disrupt meetings, and just think about how to keep improving and making the most of this time that we're in. So thank you everyone for being here. I will be sending out via Jaden a wrap-up of the meeting today with a recording, as well as the links that I just shared. But please stay connected with one another, and we'll see you in January, hopefully. We'll be sending out a short survey shortly, just to get some feedback on the conversation series for those of you who have attended one or more, and to get some ideas for what else should we talk about going forward. So have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are, and just stay safe out there and keep talking. Take care.
Thanks, Bev. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kirsten. Stay healthy.
Stay well. Bye-bye.
Bye.